Are you tired of playing the same 3 MMOs with the same overused generic high fantasy aesthetic that every game in the grandmother has? Are you looking for a truly brand new and unique superhero MMO experience to really sink your teeth into? Well, look no further because the best superhero MMORPG of all time has just released, and its name is Ship of Heroes. I mean, it has everything you could ever want in an MMORPG. It's got a super in-depth character creator, engaging and stimulating combat, beautiful AAA level quality graphics, and a bustling loyal community of die-hard fans. If you like all of this, then Ship of Heroes, the greatest superhero MMO of all time, is the game for you. If you are blind, deaf, and slightly mentally insane. As you can probably discern from the title and the thumbnail alone, Ship of Heroes was an interesting experience to say the least. And I know what you're probably thinking, this game looks like it was released back in 2001. Well, you see, the thing is that it wasn't. It was actually released in this year of 2025. Yes, this is a modern day title that you actually have to pay modern day money for. And not only was it extremely difficult for me to keep myself playing for any longer than 10 minutes, but I also had to pay $60 to even be able to play it in the first place. Yes, you heard that right. This game you're seeing right here on your screen cost $60. Not Venezuelan dollars, not Zimbabwean dollars, American dollars. The same price point as Elden Ring. Think about that. For those of you who don't know yet, Ship of Heroes is a superhero-inspired MMORPG from a small indie dev team that costs $60 upfront in order to even be able to play it, with an additional $15 a month subscription after the first one. And their justification for this is because they don't have any microtransactions, so they need a way to make money. Fair enough. However, you do not need to be charging this much for an indie project that most people have never heard of. Would you rather spend $60 on this game, or would you rather spend it on literally anything else? This price tag for an MMO is unheard of, especially when the big AAA MMOs on the market like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, or Guild Wars 2 are either charging less money or are free to play. This amount is just absurd in today's market and will be a huge detriment to the success of this game. What's also another huge red flag are the developers themselves, because they cannot handle any ounce of negative feedback and are trying to silence any criticism. One of the reasons why they set their price so absurdly high was to quote-unquote keep the trolls out, because for some reason the developers are delusional enough to believe that everyone criticizing their game are trolls and review bombers from City of Hero fanboys. No, I am not kidding, they genuinely believe that. Look, I know this is a small indie project made by a tiny development team of like 5 people, and I get that. Making video games is hard, especially MMOs, so generally I want nothing but the best for every indie game dev trying to make it in this industry. But sometimes they make it so difficult to root for them when they're actively being combative and hostile towards any sort of criticism. These devs have to be the most out of touch, egotistical, and combative ones that I've ever seen from an indie studio. So much so to the point where they're literally locking posts, banning people, and arguing with dissenting opinions on their Steam forums page. They even have a couple of staunch defenders of the game making these really cringe posts about how amazing it is. Like quote, "Ship of Heroes is a true MMORPG." Really? I'm not sure if this guy was a paid actor or he's actually one of the developers' alt accounts. It seems like they really believe that their game is pure gold, even implying that the game is better than City of Heroes, the defunct title from 2004 that this project was heavily inspired by. And although it was officially shut down in 2012, it still has a dedicated fanbase that runs private servers for it to this very day. I know that superhero MMOs are unfortunately a dying breed of video games, and Ship of Heroes was trying to fill in that empty void, and I respect that. But if you're actively hostile to your critics, believing that they're all just trolls from the other game, meanwhile you're disparaging them and acting as if you're the superior game, then it's hard for me to feel any sympathy for your plight. According to one of the devs, Ship of Heroes was in development for about 7.5 years, being funded through donations and supporter crowdfunding. But after I did some digging around, I found evidence that they might have possibly been working on this project for over 9 years, with their Kickstarter dating all the way back to April 4th, 2017, and being cancelled just 3 days after its launch. The reasoning behind it was because they felt like they weren't going to hit their goal of $400,000, so they prematurely cancelled it. That way they wouldn't be leading anyone on with false promises, which is kinda respectable. After this, they put their heads down and focused on solely developing the game, and through so much toil and trouble, they were ready to release onto Steam on September 22nd, 2025. This was their big day, their moment to reveal themselves to the world and blow everyone's expectations out of the water. And if we go onto the Steam store page, we can see that the audience absolutely... they absolutely hate it. It's got a 26% overall positive rating. How curious. Well, it doesn't mean anything anyway. They're all probably just trolls trying to review bomb one of the best superhero MMOs of our time. The reviews are all negative? I'm sure they're all just trolls too. I'm sure there were boatloads of people on the edge of their seats, waiting for it to release as we speak. It had a maximum peak of 100 players on launch day, and now there are about 5 people online, including the devs themselves. Oof, well that's odd. Maybe most of the player base is just using a standalone launcher separate from Steam. I'm sure there are like hundreds of thousands of players on the servers right now as we speak. So let's hop on and see for ourselves. Starting out, we get to the character creator, which has 5 classes to choose from: Tank, Brawler, Devastator, Support, and Controller. The tank and support are self-explanatory. The Brawler is the melee DPS, the Devastator is the ranged DPS, and the Controller is the mage class. I personally like playing the melee fighter who can deal lots of damage archetype in video games, so Brawler seems to be right up my alley, so I go with that one. Next, we get to choose our power sets for a hero. I like being able to use twin swords, so I go with that one because I'm edgy like that. After that, we get to the character creator, where you can choose from 3 different body archetypes: female, male, and silverback gorilla. Hey, don't look at me, that's just what it is. I didn't want to go too crazy here, so I just chose the normal male body type. We then get to the actual character creator, where you can choose from a huge assortment of different body parts. And honestly, out of everything, the character creator is probably the best thing about this game. There's just a ton of options here to pick from, and there are even more sliders to really customize your character in detail. I didn't want to spend too much time in the character creator, so I just went with the whitest white boy you can ever think of. You know, the kind that listened to My Chemical Romance and wore Blink 182 t-shirts in high school. Anyway, after a bit of fiddling around, I finally make my character and enter the world of Ship of Heroes. As we spawn into the starting area, I move my character around, and already I sense there's something off. The controls are janky. I tried turning my camera around, and immediately my suspicions were confirmed to be true. The devs did not code the camera movement properly, which is one of the most basic things that you can even do in an MMO, and somehow they've messed it up. You see, when you hold left click, it's supposed to unlock the camera and allow you to move it around your character, which it technically does do that here, but it also tilts it slightly in that direction as well. That's why it looks like the camera is rotating left and right as I swing it around. And the thing is that it shouldn't do that. It shouldn't be slightly rotating side to side like this. It's completely disorienting and makes the game feel weird to play. As you can see in a normal MMO, moving the camera doesn't tilt it side to side. In fact, it stays level the entire time. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Ship of Heroes camera also lags behind slightly with your mouse movement. It's very subtle, but once you notice it, it sticks out like a sore thumb, making the gameplay feel much more clunky. And while the left click movement is janky, it's still somewhat tolerable because I can just not use it, unlike the right click camera movement, which is just straight up not implemented properly. In any MMO, when you hold down the right click, it's supposed to turn your camera and your character at the same time. When it's done correctly, it should look something like this. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, that's what I thought as well, except that's not how it works in Ship of Heroes. Here, holding down the right click only turns your character, then the camera follows up behind them a second later. This is extremely awkward to use because you can do stuff like this, where if you do a full 360 with your character, the camera doesn't turn at all because it thinks the player has not changed the direction that they're facing, even if you do a million spins. This feels awful. The fact that the camera lags behind your movements is completely unintuitive and makes the game feel jank. This is a mistake that a college student would make for the game development project, not an actual licensed business asking for thousands of dollars in crowdfunding. I don't know how you can mess this one simple control scheme up, and I don't even think it's that hard to program as someone who studied a bit of game development back in college. And would you believe me when I said that there are even more problems with the camera? Issues that I'll get into soon enough, but for now, let's move on to the tutorial. I talked to the quest NPC in front of me, which is voiced using AI. In fact, all of them are, and it's pretty obvious too.
Welcome to the Justice Corps. The forms are all automated so you can start fighting right away. I've got contacts who could use a hand, or you can just patrol the city and look for trouble.
Like, it nearly sounds like they just used Microsoft text-to-speech to do the voices of all these characters. I would much rather prefer if there was no voice acting at all than to have Microsoft Sam do it. That's just me though. Anyway, ignoring the blatant usage of AI, I make my way to the first quest location on foot, taking in the sights at the world that the devs have created, and it's fine. It's nothing too interesting, just a bunch of futuristic looking buildings and random NPCs placed all over the area. After a little bit of walking, I make it to Officer Rick, who gives out the very first quest, which is to enter the tutorial dungeon behind him. Alright, sure. I walk up to the door and fiddle around with my keyboard, pressing every key in order to figure out what the interact button is, because the game doesn't tell you. Like, there's no prompt or anything, you're just supposed to figure it out on your own. After a couple of seconds of confusion, I was eventually able to enter the tutorial dungeon, and upon entering, I was met with this really weird background music that sounds like something that would be in some corporate marketing ad made by an HR team. Just take a listen to this.
So you're the inspector. You don't look like you need it, but I'll guide you through the finished parts of the training course to check for glitches. Loading. Okay. You'll need functioning limbs for this test, hero. Wiggle them in a silly fashion now.
It feels really out of place, and I'm not sure what was the vibe they were trying to go for here. I get that it probably came in a bundle with a bunch of other store-bought music assets from the Unreal Engine store, but come on, at least use something else that matches the atmosphere. Or you can just not use music at all and have ambient background noise, like that's totally valid. It's not about what noise you can find to fill in the silence, it's about the emotions or the vibe that you evoke when the player steps into your world. Putting random music just to have something there makes it feel tacky and really poorly thought out. Anyways, I talked to the robot here who gives you a rundown on the different systems and menus, which was pretty easy and succinct. Then our robot companion leads us to the next objective by having a seizure. We then get showed some more mechanics like flight, which the characters all have for some reason, even though I feel like it shouldn't be in their power set, but who am I to speak on that? I'm not the devs. If they want to make a universe where everyone has super flight and super speed, then let them, I guess. We then get to this vending machine that lets us buy infusions, which are consumable buffs that give small stat boosts for a short period of time. It's not useful for anything really because the stat boosts aren't that significant to actually matter anyway, so you can just ignore them altogether. After that, we get into the part that you've all been waiting for, the combat. If you're wondering, no, that's not your screen glitching out, and no, I have not edited anything about this clip. What you are watching is the full, raw, unedited gameplay of Ship of Heroes. Yeah, it's not great. All it really boils down to is just hit 2 buttons until all the bad guys die. I'm not sure if there are any boss mechanics or any hazards that you have to avoid during combat, and during my 2 hours playing this, I've never once found an enemy that had either one of these 2 mechanics. The combat is, as what you've probably expected, extremely rudimentary and shallow. As I played more of Ship of Heroes, the more mind-numbingly bored I got because it just wasn't that interesting at all. Also, if you've noticed, the camera completely spazzes out during combat. That's not a problem with my PC, it's a problem with how they've coded the camera. For some reason, when you try to move while you're doing melee attacks, the camera can't handle that, so it just has a stroke. It's fine when I do my ranged attack though, which I have in my kit for some reason, even though I chose the brawler class specifically not to use ranged attacks, but that's besides the point. Anyways, after I defeat the bad robot, the tutorial NPC spontaneously explodes for no reason at all. Apparently he malfunctioned from a computer virus or something. Oh well, after that we finish up the dungeon and leave. Then after that, we get told to go to the Mages Guild because they need help with something. So I make my way over there, and in the meantime, I guess I can talk about the map and how weirdly made it is. As you can see, there are a bunch of icons overlaid on top of the map here, which seems all fine and normal, except that whenever you move the map, it also moves the layer that the icons are on separately. So you just get something like this where the icons are all floating off the map and are nowhere near their intended location. They can even float off of the map itself a little bit. I don't know, I just thought that was kind of funny how they've decided to implement this feature. Anyways, after a bit of walking, we make it to the Mages Guild, where we speak to Iris the Great, who needs our help stopping this organization of evil mages called the Red Sigil from smuggling illegal goods. Iris tells me that they're selling it at a black market located in a nearby unsuspecting office building. Alright, not sure why they're doing it so recklessly within the public eye, but whatever. So we head on over there to teach those Red Sigil guys a lesson. I entered the dungeon and immediately we get to throwing hands with these goons. Yeah, this part isn't really that interesting because all I literally do is hit the same 2 buttons till they die. There's no story or boss fight or anything, just clear every mob in the dungeon and it's done. So I'll give my thoughts on it while the gameplay of me beating up the bad guys rolls in the background. To be honest, this whole area seems kinda off, like it was haphazardly thrown together in an hour or two, because the entire area is pretty much just one huge flat open room with no walls and a bunch of random assets strewn about. And I don't know if this is me being cynical or not, but I think the reason why the devs made this dungeon was probably because they had a bunch of extra unused assets from all the store-bought asset packs they purchased from the Unreal Engine store. Like, why are there random wooden tables set up with lit candles and silverware on it like a family just sat here for Thanksgiving dinner? This is supposed to be a black market where illegal goods are being sold. Why are there just random pieces of furniture just laying about everywhere? Well, I'll tell you why. It's to fill up all the empty space because the store-bought castle interior map that they purchased was way too big. But what do I know? I'm not a game developer. Maybe they intended it to look this way. But regardless of that, I take lethal damage here and I got sent back to the entrance. That's alright, I'll just take the 5 seconds to walk back to where I died and finish the rest of the dungeon. After that, I return to Iris and complete the quest. She then gives me another one where we have to eliminate the Red Sigil again, who are trying to use an illegal regen device. I'm not sure what that means, but apparently it's bad, so I go on over there and kill all of the bad guys there. I'm not really going to go into detail about this dungeon because it's largely the same as the last one with the same enemies, mechanics, and everything. So I just beat them all up, finish the dungeon, and go back to Iris to continue the story. At this point I get a little bored, so I take a little walk and check out the housing system because every MMO needs one for some reason. So I walk up to the housing vendor and...
Do you need anything?
Okay, I don't think that sounds quite right. Maybe it's a bug?
Do you need anything?
Nope, it happens every time, so either the AI voice broke during the recording and nobody caught it, or the devs really couldn't be bothered to fix the glitched voice. Anyways, I buy the smallest apartment for $1 a month to see what it's like, and to be honest, this is probably the least buggy feature in the game, which isn't really saying much considering everything that we've seen so far. At this point, I'm like an hour into my playthrough, and I'm starting to get a little bored by the content that's been offered, and I really want to do one of their raids that the devs themselves have been advertising so staunchly. So I ask in global chat when were the raids going to happen, and I get no response. Cool. That's alright though. Everyone's probably just busy having the time of their lives doing, I'm not actually sure what people do in this game. Because so far during my entire playthrough, I haven't seen a single soul wandering about. Even in the starting area, no one was around. It's been a pretty lonely adventure thus far, and I was trying to socialize with the so-called thriving community, but unfortunately, I guess they weren't so welcoming to brand new players. Oh well, that's their loss, as I would have been a valuable addition to their booming community of 5 players. So I go back to dungeon delving, but this time I want to take on a challenge quest, which is just a normal dungeon but slightly harder. And for the most part, I clear through it pretty easily. That is until I encounter this one really tough enemy who I just can't for the life of me beat. He has way too much health and does way too much damage, and no matter how many times I try, I am simply too underleveled to beat him. So unfortunately, I have to concede this dungeon and come back later when I'm stronger. That's if I do. I don't think I'll be sticking around much longer. Anyways, after I exit the dungeon in shame, I decide to take a better look at Apotheosis City in all of its glory. The thing I'm most curious about are the 2 giant silver statues clashing swords with each other, because this was one of their main set pieces in all of their promotional material, so why not appreciate it for myself in-game? And what better way to use it than to use the fly feature that every player gets access to? So I fly up there to get a better angle of the cool statues, and is that Link's Hylian shield from The Legend of Zelda? What's that doing in this game? Well, I guess it's not quite exactly his shield. It is a bit different, so it looks like Nintendo can't sue Ship of Heroes, fortunately. Other than that, the statues themselves aren't really that remarkable. I mean, they're just 2 masked, unidentifiable individuals clashing swords for some reason. I have no idea who these people are or who they're supposed to represent, and I don't think the devs know either. They just think it looks cool. That's good for them, I guess. After I've closely examined the statues, I then take a few laps around the city skyline to really enjoy the view. And it's one of the views of all time. I can't really say I was impressed by it, but at least there was effort put into this, I think. Whatever, I then go back to questing, where for our next mission, we have to suss out and identify the hidden Red Sigil members who've infiltrated the Academy of Mages and disguised themselves as the students. So we sniff out the rats with our trusty scanner drone and beat up the bad guys hidden throughout the academy. After that, we then have to give a motivational speech in front of the students for some reason. So I give the speech in the worst possible way and they ended up booing me. Oh come on, I just saved you guys from a literal criminal organization and this is how you treat me? Talk about being ungrateful. Anyways, after we've given the worst motivational speech ever, we go back to Iris to report our findings, and now she wants us to testify with her at the Superhero Alliance meeting that the Red Sigil should be designated as a terrorist organization. I don't know why they haven't been already, but sure, I guess nobody knows about them for plot reasons. We get into the meeting hall where we're faced with the other head mages within the guild, trying to convince them that the Red Sigil are indeed a real threat to take seriously. After some back and forth, we eventually convince enough members and a vote passes 3-1 to fully put our resources into fighting the Red Sigil. Awesome. I don't understand why they're not a bigger issue to these people, but whatever. Apparently they have better things to do. And this is the point in the storyline where the Red Sigil gets put on the back burner in order to introduce a brand new enemy force called the Prometheans, who are this race of aliens that have invaded Apotheosis City, so it's our job to eradicate them and stop their advances once and for all. So for the next dungeon, we go to the underground sewers where the Prometheans are residing in order to exterminate them all. However, this time it's different because we're accompanied by a small squadron of veteran mages ready to help us defend our home. This dungeon is pretty much exactly the same as the other ones, except that we have other NPCs with us now. So I guess this is a consolation to the fact that I'll never get to experience playing with a full party of real people because there's simply not enough players playing this game, period. When I was playing, there were about 16 players online at the time. Now there are about 3. Not even enough for a full party. I bet those 3 people who paid $60 are really having the time of their lives right now. Anyways, we get through the dungeon, killing every enemy in sight till we reach the end where there's an actual boss fight for the first time. That's amazing. However, the only problem is that it still behaves exactly like any normal enemy, so we just wailed on him till he died. Then that was it for that dungeon. And at this point, I was nearing my 2-hour time limit, so this was the last piece of content that I explored during my playthrough, because any longer than that and I wouldn't be able to return it on Steam. So I'll just give my thoughts and impressions on this game thus far. Alright, so I know what everyone's thinking while watching this video. It's probably along the lines of, this game is an absolute scam. And while I can see the reason why you guys would think that, however, I would have to kinda disagree. Ship of Heroes is not a scam, and that's because it would imply that you were expecting one thing and got something else entirely different, which I don't think is the case here. You can actually see what the game was like from all of the promotional material the devs have publicly put out there. And if you just took 2 seconds to look through all the gameplay videos and screenshots, you would see that you're getting exactly what you see here. They never tried to hide what this game looked like or was trying to be. They're giving you exactly what was promised. So because of that one distinction alone, I can't consider Ship of Heroes a scam. But what I can call it though is a massive train wreck of epic proportions. It was already one thing that the game looked like it came out in 2002, but it's also another to truly believe that the whole package of what you're offering here is worth paying $60 for. $60 plus a 15-month subscription that could have been spent on games 1 million times better than this one. You can buy Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, Witcher 3, Expedition 33, literally anything else. Or you can even just pay for another subscription MMO like WoW or Final Fantasy XIV, because those are cheaper than this. It's extremely delusional to think that people were willing to pay a price higher than the average market for MMOs for a game that looks like an Unreal Engine asset flip, which it is. And this delusion is very evident with how the developers try to damage control this unmitigated disaster on the Steam forums, banning people for criticizing the game, locking or deleting posts that are somewhat negative, and trying to gaslight people into thinking that this game is better than what it actually is. On the forums, the devs have posted an FAQ answering the most prominent questions like, why is this game so expensive? To which they respond by saying the reason why it costs so much is because there's a lot of character customization and the game can handle 50 plus players at once. That's it. Two features that are pretty much obligatory in any modern MMO, and it's being glorified as some sort of unique selling point of the game that somehow makes it worth $60. Not to mention that there aren't even enough players playing right now to fill up a single pre-made party. There were MMOs released 15 years ago that could do exactly what they're advertising here for free. Them believing that their game is worth more than the other long-standing MMOs on the market is frankly highly pretentious. And for some reason, they think that all of the negative comments and criticism comes from review bombers and trolls from City of Heroes fanboys, because apparently normal people can't come to those conclusions on their own. They really believe that Ship of Heroes is the best MMO on the market that does things that no other MMO can possibly do, when that's provably false. Ship of Heroes looks like one of those obscure off-brand games in 2004 that your mom would get for you because you couldn't afford World of Warcraft, except here it costs more than WoW. There's literally zero reason to want to play this game other than because you're an early supporter and you're a victim of the sunk cost fallacy. If you want to play a superhero MMO, just go play DC Universe Online or even the City of Heroes private servers, because those are free to play, they have a bigger population, and they have much more content. 9 years of development, and it resulted in a peak of 100 players on launch day, and now it barely even has 10, if that. However, the biggest obstacle holding this game back are the devs themselves, because of how delusional they are and how they can't handle dissenting feedback and criticism. For that reason alone, it's hard for me to really feel bad about how their project is dead on arrival. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to refund this game because there's no way I am paying $60 for this.